With each inhale, something moves beyond the lungs. The sensation of immediate relief is not just a chemical trick, it's a subtle shift in the energetic field. It's common to hear that smoking relaxes, that it helps clear the mind. But if it were truly a clarifier, why does the mind remain trapped in the need for another cigarette? Why does the relief dissipate so quickly, leaving only the craving for more? Smoke carries an exchange. Something leaves, but something stays. Just as ancient civilizations burned herbs to invoke spirits, heal wounds, or even cast spells, the modern act of smoking also has a hidden effect. What is being offered in exchange for fleeting pleasure? Vitality, clarity, spiritual balance. Many don't realize that smoking doesn't just alter the physical body, it affects the perception of reality. The repetitive act of lighting, inhaling, and exhaling is almost hypnotic, creating a cloud around consciousness. A veil forms, not just in the air, but in the senses, the thoughts, and the connection to the present moment. And what if this haze weren't just a side effect of nicotine? What if it were a kind of spiritual camouflage, keeping certain emotions, truths, and pains hidden, never allowing them to be fully faced? Welcome to the Arcane Vault. The true cost of relief may be the disconnection from one's essence. If every substance we consume carries a vibration, what can be said about smoke? Unlike water, which purifies, or food, which nourishes, smoke consumes. Its natural movement is dissipation, but what does it take with it? There's a reason so many spiritual practices avoid substances that cloud the mind. It's not just about health, but about access to the self. Inner clarity cannot be found within a whirlwind of ashes. This video is not a judgment, but an invitation to reflect. If smoke crosses dimensions, what exactly are we allowing it to carry away? Since the dawn of humanity, the act of burning herbs and leaves has been present in rituals, ceremonies, and sacred practices. Smoke has always been seen as a bridge between worlds, an element that dissipates into the air and seems to carry intentions, prayers, and invocations with it. In indigenous tribes, ancient temples, and spiritual practices across cultures, smoke was never just a residue of combustion, but a manifestation of the unseen. Shamans, healers, and priests have always known that smoke has power. It purifies, opens portals, carries messages to the gods, and wards off negative spirits. However, the fundamental difference between ancestral use and the modern habit of smoking lies in intention. While in rituals, inhaling smoke was a conscious means of connection with something greater, in the daily life of cities, this same act has become mechanical, a reflex of addiction, anxiety, and automation. What was once done with reverence now happens without presence, without awareness, without meaning. Fire, the element of transformation, consumed the chosen herbs so that their effects could be felt in both body and soul. Smudging was performed to dispel dense energies. Tobacco was used in rituals to communicate with ancestral spirits, and incense was burned to elevate the vibration of a space. But when the act of inhaling smoke loses this sacred context, it can become an unconscious bond that entraps rather than liberates. The real question is not just what is being smoked, but why it is being smoked. The industrialized cigarette of today carries a very different energetic weight than the ritualistic tobacco of ancient peoples. While one was used to elevate perception and bring clarity, the other often serves as a crutch to escape oneself. The same act, but with opposite intentions. Smoke can be a bridge or a prison. It can open paths or obscure them. What was once a channel to access higher states of consciousness has for many become a veil that covers emotions, one that soothes for a moment but exacts a silent price. In the past, each inhale had a purpose. Today, each inhale has become just a habit. When the smoke rises, it takes something with it. Everything we consume affects our energy, physically, emotionally, and spiritually. The food we eat, the sounds we hear, the thoughts we cultivate. Each of these elements either builds or depletes our vibrational field. And smoke, filled with chemicals and unconscious intentions, is no different. Many smokers report persistent fatigue, mental fog, and a kind of emotional numbness, as if the mind were clouded, as if feelings were muffled. The smoke that enters the lungs also seems to settle in less visible places, creating subtle layers of blockages. The energetic body is not just an abstract concept, it can be felt and it can be altered. In the spiritual teachings of various traditions, breath is seen as the bridge between the physical and the divine. Air is the force of life, the connection to the present, the essence that keeps us existing. However, when this channel is constantly invaded by smoke, something is lost. Like a fog covering the landscape, smoke doesn't just enter the lungs, it envelops consciousness. What was once clarity turns into numbness. What was once fluidity becomes resistance. It's not just a matter of health, but of alignment. Dense smoke alters vibrational frequency, clouding the connection to subtler dimensions. Those who seek meditation, intuition, or spiritual expansion often report that after quitting smoking, they notice a shift not only in their body, but in how they perceive and understand the world. As if a black veil were lifted, as if something that had been blocked finally began to dissolve. But the transition is not immediate. Often, when quitting smoking, a person comes face to face with emotions that had been hidden, muffled by the habit. What seemed like just an addiction may have actually been a barrier against unresolved pain, a way to avoid what needed to be faced. The smoke soothed, but it also silenced, and when it dissipates, the truth is revealed. Smoking may be an unconscious attempt to create a shield against the world, against one's own feelings, against the discomfort of existence. But everything we avoid follows us. Sooner or later the fog lifts, and we find ourselves face to face with who we really are. The first inhale, the first exhalation of smoke, and for a fleeting moment there is relief. The body responds with a chemical release, a breath of tranquility. But this sensation is just a trick, a temporary spell that soon fades, leaving behind a subtle emptiness, a hunger disguised as need. Nicotine is clever. It deceives the brain, manipulating neurotransmitters that regulate pleasure and relaxation. Each drag reinforces an illusory cycle, relief followed by craving, craving followed by another cigarette followed by relief. But if it were truly a solution, why does the craving always return? If it were a real cure, why is it never enough? Smoke acts as a veil, a curtain that hides the real cause of discomfort. The relief it brings is not liberation, but an artificial pause. The anxiety that seems to dissipate was never truly resolved, just pushed down, muffled, masked. As soon as the effect wears off, it resurfaces, often stronger, demanding another cigarette, another spell, another dose of deception. And so, without realizing it, a person becomes a prisoner of their own ritual. The cigarette turns into a constant companion, an always available escape, a comfort that is never complete. But at what cost? Not just to the body, but to the soul itself. Because each inhale not only feeds a chemical cycle, but also reinforces an internal narrative, the belief that something external is needed to bring peace, that relief can never come from within. Some say that certain addictions do not arise by chance but are part of an old story, a karmic bond that continues to manifest. If we look closely, we'll see that many long-time smokers have tried to quit countless times, yet always find themselves back at the same point, as if something were pulling them back, as if an invisible force kept them tied to the repetitive act of lighting, inhaling, exhaling. But where did this cycle begin? Did it start in this lifetime, or does it go further back? Some feel as though they were born with this inclination, as if cigarettes had always been there, waiting to be picked up again. Others notice strange patterns in their family history, grandparents, parents, uncles, all smokers, as if this behavior were a thread woven across generations. Not just an inherited habit, but an energetic bond that perpetuates itself. If everything we do creates a ripple effect in the subtle field, smoking is no exception. Smoke can carry intentions, but it can also bind. Like a knot that tightens with every repeated gesture, each inhale can reinforce that tie, and the cycle continues until it is consciously broken. Breaking such a pattern is not just an act of willpower, but an act of liberation. It means looking beyond the physical need and seeing what lies behind the craving. What does this habit truly represent? What does it hide? What does it feed? Many who free themselves from smoking speak of a feeling of rebirth, as if something inside them had finally dissolved, as if, by breaking this bond, they were reclaiming a part of themselves that had been trapped in time. Because in the end, quitting smoking is not just about giving up an addiction. It's about letting go of an invisible weight, a burden that may not even belong to this lifetime. Cigarettes are not always just a refuge. For some, they become a mirror. The smoke that rises into the air may be a temporary escape, but in its essence, it is also a symbol, a reflection of what is inside, hidden, denied. Carl Jung described the shadow as the part of the psyche we keep in the unconscious, everything we repress, deny, or refuse to see in ourselves. Our fears, weaknesses, suppressed impulses, and unresolved traumas hide in this concealed region of the mind, subtly influencing our choices, often in destructive ways. Cigarettes may be one of many reflections of this shadow, a subconscious ritual of escape, repression, and self-sabotage. The shadow manifests in countless ways: compulsions, addictions, repetitive behavioral patterns. Smoking may be a symptom of this psychic dynamic, a mechanism through which the mind tries to numb something it does not want to face. With each inhale, there is a momentary relief, a brief silence, as if the smoke wraps around unwanted emotions, suffocating them before they can be expressed. But what exactly is being suppressed? Jung said that what we do not integrate consciously ends up controlling us unconsciously. Often smoking becomes a refuge from deep anxieties, a buffer against the fear of emptiness, a way to avoid confronting emotions that feel unbearable. The act of smoking can be a metaphor for the attempt to consume something external to fill an internal void, an insatiable desire, an emotional hunger that cannot be satisfied with smoke. At the same time, smoking can function as a symbol of silent self-destruction. For Jung, denying the shadow does not weaken it. On the contrary, it forces it to find disguised ways to express itself. When a person finds themselves repeating the smoking cycle, despite knowing it's harmful, despite feeling the weight of addiction, there may be an echo of the shadow archetype at play. The need for control and the guilt over one's behavior are part of this inner struggle, where consciousness tries to ignore what the unconscious insists on bringing to light. But the shadow is not only negative, it also holds undiscovered potential. When faced and understood, it becomes a source of strength and transformation. In this sense, smoking can be an invitation to investigate what lies behind the habit. What does it symbolize? What hidden part of the psyche is trying to manifest through this cycle? What happens when the smoke dissipates and there is nothing left to cover what is inside? True liberation is not just about quitting smoking, but about integrating what the cigarette represented, looking at the shadow without fear, without repression, without escape. When this process happens, the need to fill the void with smoke ceases to make sense because consciousness itself becomes enough. And at that moment, instead of trying to dissolve oneself into ashes, the individual can begin to rebuild with authenticity. The human body is not just flesh, bones, and organs. It is also an energetic field, filled with invisible flows that determine our physical, mental, and spiritual state. In various esoteric traditions, this system is described through chakras, nadis, meridians, or auric fields. These subtle centers regulate our vitality, influence our mood, and connect our consciousness to what lies beyond the material plane. And everything we ingest, inhale, or absorb interferes with this delicate energy network. Smoking does not only affect the lungs and circulatory system, it directly impacts these invisible channels, creating blockages and altering an individual's vibrational frequency. The lungs, for example, are directly connected to the heart chakra, Anahata, which governs our emotions, our capacity to love, and our connection with others. Smoke, loaded with toxins and dense substances, compromises the flow of this center, making it more closed, heavier, and more prone to feelings of sadness, isolation, and disconnection. Additionally, breathing is one of the pillars of vital energy. In traditions such as yoga and Taoism, the way we breathe defines our ability to capture and distribute prana, vital energy, throughout the body. The air entering the lungs does not only carry oxygen, it also transports the force of life. When this exchange is constantly interrupted by smoke, the body's energy flow suffers. Breath becomes shallow, vibration decreases, and the sensation of fatigue and stagnation becomes more present. Cigarettes also affect the throat chakra, Vishuddha, responsible for expression, communication, and inner truth. Like a filter that obstructs vocal clarity, smoke interferes with this center, making it harder to connect with authenticity and self-expression. People who smoke frequently may struggle to verbalize deep emotions or to connect with their own truth. The energetic impact of smoking is neither immediate nor obvious, but it accumulates over time. Small blockages become major obstacles. Intuition weakens, creativity loses strength, and the sense of presence in the world becomes hazy. It's as if, by inhaling smoke, a person is covering their own light with a dense, grey veil, making it harder to see their path and feel their own essence. But just as smoke can block, it can also be dissipated. The energetic body is malleable, always ready to regenerate when given the space to breathe freely. When the smoke disappears, the subtle centers begin to realign, allowing vitality to circulate without obstruction. Fatigue gives way to lightness, the mind becomes clearer, and the soul starts to find its own rhythm again. Quitting smoking is not just about breaking a habit, it is about undoing a bond that for a long time was rooted in the mind, body, and spirit. Often, the urge to smoke does not arise solely from chemical dependence, but from an unconscious connection to the cigarette, as if it were a silent companion, a refuge, an escape valve. Breaking this link requires more than willpower. It demands awareness, ritual, and internal transformation. The first step toward liberation is recognizing what is truly behind the addiction. It is not enough to simply want to quit. It is necessary to understand what need the cigarette is fulfilling. Does it bring comfort? Does it fill a void? Does it help calm an unnamed anxiety? The cigarette is often a symptom, not the cause. And when the root of the habit is identified, it becomes easier to replace it with something that genuinely nourishes the being on a deeper level. Creating rituals of release is one of the most effective ways to dissolve the bond with smoking. In the past, rituals were how humanity marked moments of transformation, and overcoming an addiction is a form of rebirth. Burning the last pack as a symbolic act, writing a farewell letter to cigarettes, or even performing a meditation to release this attachment can be ways to communicate to the unconscious that a new phase has begun. The brain needs this signal, this ritualistic closure, to accept the change in a more organic way. Spiritual tools can also be powerful allies in this process. Guided meditations for energetic cleansing, visualizations of liberation, positive affirmations, and even prayers can help reprogram the mind and rebalance the body's energy. Smoking creates a dense, energetic bond. Quitting requires a conscious purification process. Herbal baths, Mindful breathing, pranayama, and practicing presence without the need for an escape are ways to replace the smoking cycle with something that elevates rather than restrains. But it's important to remember that the journey will not be linear. There will be difficult days, moments of temptation, and lapses where the urge to light a cigarette feels stronger than any rational argument. And that is part of the process. Every relapse is an opportunity for learning, not a failure. The key is not to judge oneself, not to dwell on the mistake, but to move forward with greater awareness and more compassion. When smoking is abandoned, something must take the place it once occupied. Addiction is not just physical, but also energetic, emotional, and even ritualistic. There is a gesture, a sensation, a moment of pause that for a long time was associated with smoking. If this space is not consciously filled, its absence can become unbearable, leading to relapse. The key to true liberation lies in replacing the destructive habit with practices that nourish, cleanse, and elevate. The first and most obvious replacement is breathing. Smoking compromises lung capacity, restricts airflow, and dims the connection to one's own vitality. When someone quits smoking, the body asks to relearn how to breathe. Conscious breathing exercises like yoga pranayamas can help not only strengthen the lungs, but also realign the body's energy. Inhaling deeply and feeling the air fill every cell is a reminder that life continues without smoke, that true satisfaction comes from within, not from an external chemical stimulus. Another powerful substitute is the use of natural aromas. If cigarettes used to bring a sense of comfort or sensory pleasure, essential oils and high-quality incense can fulfill this need in a healthier way. Lavender for relaxation, peppermint for mental clarity, sandalwood for deepening spiritual connection. The sense of smell has a profound impact on emotional states, and reprogramming it with new scents can be a way to break the mental association with smoking. Contact with nature also plays a vital role in raising one's vibration. The habit of smoking often creates a dense bubble around the individual, a closed cycle of anxiety, craving, relief, and guilt. Walking outdoors, feeling the wind, observing the sky are ways to break this bubble, to remember that there is a vast and vibrant world beyond the cycle of addiction. Sitting under the sun, stepping on the earth, diving into the sea, each of these experiences purifies, renews, and expands. The cigarette may have been an unconscious ritual, but now it is possible to create new rituals that bring clarity instead of haze. The act of lighting a cigarette can be replaced by lighting a candle, incense, or a positive intention. The habit of bringing something to the mouth can be redefined with the consumption of teas that cleanse and strengthen the body. Small daily changes can rebuild the entire internal structure, dissolving the need to turn to smoke for comfort. Transformation happens when one realizes that an artificial stimulus is not needed to feel pleasure, to relax, or to be present. What was once a cycle of dependence can now become a path of expansion. What once polluted can now purify. In the first days without smoking, the body feels the absence of nicotine, and the mind struggles against years of conditioning. But beyond chemical withdrawal, there is an energetic grief, a sense of loss that can be difficult to understand, as if something is being torn away, as if there is a void where there once was smoke. This feeling is not just physical, it is a reflection of the deep change taking place. The healing process often feels like an internal exorcism. There is discomfort, there is resistance, there are moments when the urge to return to the old habit becomes overwhelming. But this temptation is not just chemical. It is the shadow trying to cling to what it has always known. The mind seeks comfort in what is familiar, even if it is destructive. The key is to recognize that each craving for a cigarette is actually an invitation to look deeper. What is truly being desired? Relief, security, a moment of pause. Many who quit smoking go through a phase of irritability, anxiety, and even sadness. It is as if all the emotions that were numbed by the smoke finally find space to surface. But this discomfort is part of the purification. Just as the body eliminates toxins, the psyche also needs to release what was repressed. And for that, patience, compassion, and a real commitment to self-healing are necessary. External support can make all the difference. Seeking help from friends, support groups, therapy, or spiritual practices can make the process feel less lonely. It is not just about willpower, but about surrounding oneself with elements that sustain this change. Creating new habits, finding healthier ways to deal with stress, and allowing moments of introspection are essential steps to navigate this transition without falling into the trap of relapse. The phoenix does not fear the fire because it knows it is not its end, but its transformation. And those who choose to be reborn without smoke discover that life, without the weight of addiction, is more vibrant, lighter, and more real. Because in the end, the goal is not just to quit smoking, but to learn to breathe again, with fullness, with presence, with true freedom. And now, without the cigarette, what remains? What remains is a body that regenerates, a heart that beats stronger, lungs that expand again without limitation. What remains is a mind that learns to handle anxiety consciously, without needing escape routes. What remains is a soul that frees itself from karmic patterns, repetitive cycles, and shadows that were once silenced by smoke. This is not the end of the journey, but the beginning of a new way of existing. The cigarette may have been a companion, but it was never a friend. And now, without it, there is space for something much greater: presence, clarity, authenticity. Life without veils is an invitation to feel everything more intensely, without filters, without escapes, without smoke. To inhale deeply and realize that the pure air entering the lungs is also a symbol of inner freedom. Because in the end, true peace was never in the cigarette, but in the ability to face oneself without fear, breathe, feel, live, and discover that without the smoke, life reveals itself to be much clearer and more luminous.